She said, "Stay till it warms up." It never did. And that's the whole reason I'm still here, in this house, all these years later. Because the thing she was cold from was never the kind of cold a heater could fix, and somewhere in that long storm night, I stopped trying to warm the room and started trying to warm her. And I just never stopped. But let me start where it started, with the snow, and the knock on my door, and a woman I barely knew standing there shivering in a doorway I would end up walking through for the rest of my life. I'd lived next to Nell for 2 years, and I could have counted our real conversations on one hand. She kept to herself. Everyone on the street knew why, in the vague way neighbors know things, that her husband, Daniel, had died about a year before I moved in, that she'd stopped coming to the block things after, that the porch light she used to leave on for him she now left on out of habit, or grief, or both. A little yellow square burning all night in a window nobody came home to anymore. I'd wave. She'd wave back. That was mostly it. She was polite the way people are polite, when politeness is the wall they've built to keep everyone a safe distance from the wound. And I understood that, because I had my own version. I'd come out of a marriage a few years earlier. Nothing dramatic, no villain. Just 2 people who slowly turned into strangers under the same roof until one day we admitted it out loud. I'd bought the little house next to Nell's to start over, and mostly what starting over had meant was a lot of quiet, a lot of nights with the TV on for the noise. I was good at fixing things, cars, furnaces, leaky faucets, anything with a problem you could actually solve, and I think part of why I liked it is that it was the only kind of broken I knew how to help. So we were 2 lonely people, one shared driveway apart, each of us carefully not bothering the other. And then the storm came. It was the worst one in years. The kind where they tell you on the news to stay inside, where the wind comes off the fields and throws the snow sideways so hard the streetlights turn into these smeared halos. The power flickered a few times that evening, but held. I was on my couch with a blanket and the TV going when I heard it, 3 sharp knocks on my door, barely audible over the wind. I opened it, and there was Nell. No coat, just a cardigan wrapped around herself, snow already collecting in her hair, and she was shivering so hard she could barely get the words out. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said. "My heater died, just stopped, and it's getting so cold in there, and the repair people won't come out in this, and I didn't know who else." She stopped. I watched her hate having to ask. "Daniel used to fix it," she said. "Quieter, I never learned how. Daniel used to fix it." I think that was the moment, honestly. Not anything romantic, just this crack that opened in my chest at the sound of a woman standing in a blizzard, saying her dead husband's name, admitting she'd been sitting alone in a freezing house because the one person who used to keep her warm was gone, and she didn't know how to do it herself. "Let me grab my tools," I said. "Go back inside. I'll be right over." Her house was cold. Not chilly, cold. The kind of cold that's been settling into a place for hours, into the walls, into the floors. I could see my breath in her living room, and it was full of him. Daniel, you could feel it the second you walked in. His reading chair, still angled toward the window. A pair of work boots by the back door that nobody was ever going to wear again. Photographs everywhere, the 2 of them younger, laughing, a whole life hung on the walls. She'd kept it all exactly as it was. The house was a museum of a marriage, and she was the only visitor, wandering the halls of it every day, and I understood suddenly why she never let anyone in. Letting someone in meant letting them see the shrine, meant admitting how much of her was still living inside a life that had ended. The furnace was down in the basement, old unit. I got down there with a flashlight, and it took me about 40 minutes to find it. A failed igniter. A common thing. the kind of fix I'd done 100 times. I had a spare part in my truck, because of course I did, because fixing things was the whole shape of my life. I could have had it running in an hour. I want to be honest with you about that, because of what comes later. The heater was a small, fixable problem. Within an hour, that house was going to be warm again. The problem was never the heater. While I worked, she came down and sat on the basement steps with a flashlight, and she started to talk. I think she just needed the noise of her own voice bouncing off someone, and once she started, it all came. She told me about Daniel, how they'd met, how he proposed badly and she said yes anyway, how he was the handy one, the warm one, the one who filled a room, how he got sick fast. That was the word she kept using. Fast. Like the speed of it was the thing she couldn't forgive. How the house had gone quiet in a way she'd never known a house could be quiet. And then she said the thing that undid me. I stopped feeling cold after, she said, staring into the flashlight beam. For about a year. Isn't that strange? People kept telling me to bundle up, and I couldn't understand it. I couldn't feel the cold at all. I think I'd just gone numb. All the way through, she pulled the cardigan tighter. And then tonight, the heater died, and for the first time in a year, I actually felt freezing. And I sat there shivering, and I thought, oh, there it is. I can feel something again. And it terrified me. Because feeling the cold means you're not numb anymore. And being not numb means it all comes back. All of it. All at once. I stopped working. I looked up at her on the steps. This woman I'd waved at for 2 years and never once really seen. That's why I knocked on your door, she said. Not really about the heater. I couldn't sit alone in a cold house feeling all of it come back. I couldn't do it by myself. The furnace kicked on right about then. I'd finished without even noticing. I heard it rumble to life, felt the first breath of warm air start to move. She heard it too. She looked at the vent. And then she looked at me. And she said, "Stay till it warms up. Would you? Just till it warms up." We both knew the house would be warm in 20 minutes. Neither of us said so. I stayed. I came up from the basement, and she made tea because it gave her hands something to do, and we sat in her living room, me in a chair that wasn't Daniel's. She was careful about that, and I was careful too. And we talked, and the vents pushed warm air into the room, and the temperature climbed, and the point at which the house was objectively warmed up came and went, and neither of us mentioned it. Because it wasn't about the house. She talked, and I listened. That's mostly what that first night was. I didn't try to fix her, which was new for me. The fixer, the man who solved broken things. Because you can't solve a person, and I think somewhere in that room I understood that for the first time. Some things you don't fix. You just sit next to them so they're not alone in the cold. She'd done that for me, in a way, just by needing me. I hadn't been needed in a long time either. Around 2 a.m, she fell asleep mid-sentence, right there on the couch, the way exhausted people do when they finally feel safe enough to stop keeping watch. I found a blanket and put it over her. I turned off all the lights except the porch light. I left that one on, because I understood now what it was for. And I let myself out and went home. And I lay awake in my own bed, warm for the first time in years in a way that had nothing to do with a furnace, and I thought, I don't want to go back to the quiet. Here's the part where I have to tell you it wasn't simple. Because it wasn't. You don't just walk into a grieving woman's museum and become the next exhibit. I knew that. She knew that. What happened between us happened so slowly that for a long time neither of us called it anything. I started fixing things. It became the excuse, the way the heater had been the excuse. A sticky window, a faucet, a gutter after the thaw. And every time, I'd stay for tea, and the teas got longer. And one day I realized I wasn't inventing repairs anymore. I was just coming over. She let the museum change one small piece at a time. Daniel's boots by the back door stayed for a long, long while, and then one spring day they were gone, and she never said anything about it, and neither did I. But I saw, and I understood what it cost her, and I loved her a little more for it. That's the first time I let myself think the word. Love, standing in her kitchen, noticing a pair of boots was gone. I didn't say it out loud for a long time after that. Grief has its own clock, and I was never, ever going to be the man who rushed her off it. I want to be clear. I never once tried to take Daniel's place. You can't replace a person, and you shouldn't try. What I did, slowly, over a long, quiet year, was build a new warm place next to the old one, not instead of him. Alongside, she taught me that a heart isn't a house with only so many rooms. You can always add on. It was almost exactly a year later, another cold night. Not a storm this time, just a still, clear, freezing dark, when she said it back to me, in her own way. We were on the couch. She had her feet tucked under a blanket, and mine, and out of nowhere she said, "Do you remember the night you fixed the heater?" "Course I do," I said. "I lied to you," she said. "A little. When I said stay till it warms up." She was quiet for a moment. "The truth is I already knew it wasn't going to warm up, not the part of me that was cold. I knew a furnace couldn't touch that. I think I just wanted an excuse to have somebody in the house that didn't feel like grief." She turned and looked at me. "And then you stayed. And you kept staying, and somewhere in there I stopped being cold, and I didn't even notice it happen, because you were so gentle about it that it felt like weather changing instead of a thing anyone did." She took my hand. "It never did warm up, you know," she said softly. "The night. The house, sure, but the thing I was cold from, that didn't warm up because of a heater. It warmed up because you stayed. So don't." She squeezed my hand. "Don't go. Just stay. Not till anything. Just stay." I stayed. That was 6 years ago. We got married in her backyard, our backyard now, on a warm afternoon in the summer. Small. Just the people who mattered. She wore blue, not white. She said white was for a version of herself that had already had her wedding, and she wasn't going to pretend that first life hadn't happened, or hadn't mattered. I loved that about her. I loved that she never made me compete with a ghost. She just made room. A heart with an extra room built on. Daniel's photographs are still up. Fewer of them, arranged differently, but there. Our photographs hang next to them now. 2 lives on one wall, and nobody in this house pretends the first one didn't happen. She says grief and love aren't opposites, that grief is just love with nowhere to go, and what I did, coming over with my tools in a storm, was give some of it a place to land. The porch light still burns all night. I leave it on now. It used to be for a man who wasn't coming home. Now it's just for me, on the nights I get back late, and every time I see it from the end of the driveway, that little yellow square in the window. I think about how it used to mean someone is missing, and now it means someone is home. Same light. Whole different meaning. That's about the best summary of the 2 of us I could give you. So here's what that cold storm taught me. Some people you don't fix. The heater was never the thing, and I'm glad I was too slow to notice at first, because if I'd walked in there like a repairman with a problem to solve, I'd have fixed the furnace and gone home, and we'd both still be alone in our separate quiet houses, one driveway apart, waving. Instead, she asked me to stay till it warmed up. And it never did. Not the way she meant it. Not that night. So I just kept staying. And the staying was the warmth. That was the whole secret. There was no trick to it. You don't thaw a frozen person with the right words. You thaw them by refusing to leave the room. If there's someone in your life sitting alone in the cold, someone who's gone numb, someone who built a wall out of politeness so nobody would see the wound, you don't have to fix them. You couldn't if you tried. But you can knock on the door. You can bring your tools and your tea and your quiet company. You can stay till it warms up. And if it never quite does, stay anyway. That's the whole thing. That's the warmth. Just stay. End.